Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Western Liberty Network's weekly Saturday training. My name is Richard Burke, Executive Director of Western Liberty Network. These training sessions are held every Saturday at 1 o'clock Pacific time and can always be reached through the links and passcodes provided on the westernlibertynetwork.org website. We also record these, and if you go to the training tab on the website, you can review them if you want to go back to something you might have missed before. Western Liberty Network is an organization consisting of myself, a board of directors, an advisory committee, and numerous volunteer trainers like Senator Knopp today. Western Liberty Network's purpose is to help activists reweave the fabric of our political culture by empowering them to take local control of their own governance. WLN does this by building a farm team of trained local, nonpartisan public office holders, citizen advocates, and campaign volunteers. WLN trains activists who use the training for the campaigns and causes they care about. If you would like to support Western Liberty Network, just go to the www.westernlibertynetwork.org website and go to the support tab. All contributions to Western Liberty Network are fully tax deductible. And Donna is joining us. Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 educational organization. As such, WLN does not endorse or oppose any political party, candidate, even the ones we train, ballot measure, or legislation. The statements and other forms of information provided by our guest presenters and participants are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Western Liberty Network. Conference etiquette. To make sure we have the best audiovisual experience possible, I will begin the training session by muting all participants except the guest trainer. If you want to speak during the session, you may unmute yourself. When you are finished speaking, please mute yourself again. This practice will minimize audio feedback and distracting sounds during the training session. And with that, today's guest trainer is State Senator Tim Knopp. Senator Knopp is the Executive Vice President of the Central Oregon Builders Association and the Executive Director of Building Partners for Affordable Housing. He has been in the Senate since 2013, before which he served in the State House of Representatives. Senator Knopp and his wife of over 34 years have 4 children and a daughter-in-law. So with that, I turn the microphone over to you, Senator.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. And thank you all for attending today. Special thanks, obviously, to Richard Burke and Western Liberty Network for all their hard work over the years, training people to work in and become candidates and then elected officials. I'll update my bio a little bit just by saying that I have a grandson named Oliver, and we have a granddaughter who is due in April. So we're pretty excited about that as well. I first wanted to say, I think we're probably a small enough group where we could introduce ourselves. And what I'd really like to hear from people is what you would like to learn today, what you'd like me to cover, like if there's something you joined this Zoom call specifically for. So with that, I'd love to go to, it looks like Bob Snowden is unmuted. So maybe Bob, you can introduce yourself and tell us if there's anything you want to hear today.
Actually, I guess, with the Oregon Citizens Lobby, there is one bill that you sponsored, the SB 316. It's about establishing a rate of compensation of the Oregon Liberty Control Commission. I guess the question I have is they have, the analyst kind of says that it decreases the revenues going to the local government by 28%.
Yeah, I can't hear Bob. Bob, maybe could you adjust your mic a bit?
You can't hear me?
Not very well.
Hold on, let me, you hear me better now? Oh, here we go, wait. Is this
There we
better?
go. Yeah,
That's a lot better.
Okay, I had my microphone on top of my head there. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was questioning Tim about the SB 316. The analyst on that bill is saying that it's going to decrease the revenues going to the local governments by 28% on the first 250,000 in retail sales. Do you have any comment on that bill? That I know you're the sponsor of it.
Tell me what it does again.
Okay, I'm just reading the. maybe I should pull up the bill itself. Let me take a look at it myself. I was just doing that while we're on the call here. Okay, the addition to the bill is the commission shall pay a distillery retail outlet agent compensation for distilled
Yeah.
liquor retail sales, and apparently it's going to. And let me go back to the analyst.
Yeah, it could. I mean, Bob, this is really, this bill was kind of designed to help out those who have retail operations with spirits. We have a couple of those, Ben Distillers and others here in Central Oregon. I know there's some in Lane County who are interested in this. And could there be a small reduction to local entities? Potentially, but that could also be mitigated by additional sales. But really, it's just an opportunity for survival for these businesses that have kind of local operations like wineries do, where they have tastings and things like that. So that's what that bill is about.
Okay.
Uh,
So their response about decreasing the revenues of the local government by 28% is how much of concern is that?
Well, it may be 28%, but it's a super small number. So I don't think local governments need to be too concerned.
And this will help retail more than the local government in that area.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about supporting small business, really. And
Okay, very good.
just happens to be the spirits business. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm glad you clarified that.
Yep. Tricia, are you there and available to introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like to learn today, if anything?
Trisha, are you there?
Sorry, kids. So yes, I'm Trisha Hafner. And wait just a second. I don't know about anything specific. I guess just okay. Communication, how to oh no, if you're a timid person, like making those I don't know, once I'm comfortable I can communicate, but how to get to that comfortable situation a little easier, I guess, and just getting over that hurdle of fear, I guess.
Okay. Yep, I can definitely cover that. What about Brian?
What to wear. That one. Honey.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah, hi guys. I just was, this is just a place for me to start becoming involved.
Okay,
That's
great.
really it. So that's why
Yep.
I'm participating and will continue to do so.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Gretchen?
Yeah, I'm just here also just to kind of get involved and learn a little bit more. So mainly just listening.
Okay, great. Hey, Lucy. Lucy, are you there?
She may have stepped away for a moment.
Yep. If not, let's go to Katie.
Hi guys, I'm here just because I'm in a lot of meetings and a lot of different things, and I saw that you had some stuff about parliamentarian procedures, and it's just nice to brush up on that on occasion and make sure that we're handling our meetings appropriately. I work for Representative Weber and worked on her campaign, and I'm super excited that we got a conservative out here on the coast. Yeah, so that's what I'm here for, is just a little bit of extra education.
Awesome. Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Richard. I'm not unfamiliar with committee processes or procedures, or Robert's Rules of Order for that matter, but I'm here for the advertised purpose of today's session, looking to get involved in local government on our fire district board, and wanted to just refresh myself like Katie.
Excellent. Donna?
Michelle, are you a candidate? Are you running for a fire and rescue board position?
I plan to file for the Illinois Valley Rural Fire Protection Board of Directors for the May election. Yes.
Excellent, excellent.
Great. Donna, did you have anything?
Donna sent a message in the chat box.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I can see that. Maybe I can.
It just says, I'm here to see what you have to say about the session.
Perfect. AJ, I think you might be the last one.
Yeah, I'm AJ Allen John. Nice to be here, Senator and Richard. I did go to the training at the Embassy Suites the end of last month, which was fantastic. Thank you very much. And I'm active, and I'm here because I've had past volunteering in probably the side of industry, but I'm here also to see what I can do to help as a veteran, to see what I can do to help for gun measures and those kind of things, but to help wherever I can. And it'll be good to brush up on the parliamentary stuff as well, as Katie said. So glad to be here.
Okay, great. So did we miss anybody? I don't know that we did. Is Lucy back? Okay. Well, that's great. And thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. Again, State Senator Tim Knopp. I represent Bend, Redmond, Tumalo, Sun River, some rural areas surrounding. Obviously, we're having redistricting this year. So that's going to be an interesting process. And I think a lot of districts are going to end up changing. But dealing with Tricia's question really right off the bat, I am a very introvert type person. I am not somebody who likes to seek out public speaking. And when I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, I was even embarrassed to stand up in front of 5 or 6 family members, like my parents, grandparents, stuff like that. I remember my dad had me talk in front of literally a group of 6, 7 family members. And I mean, I was super embarrassed, very timid. And truthfully, I think really the only way to kind of get over that is just to do it and conquer it. Because the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to be with it. And I've tried kind of public speaking and being in front of groups and things with, lots of notes, like really specific notes, like speeches and things like that. And I just feel like that I tend to do better without notes. Like I'll make like note card type, just like 1 or 2 words for a specific topic that I'm going to cover. And then I just go from there. And that's kind of what I did for today's agenda. And President Courtney refers to me as no notes Knopp. And so I've just done it a lot and gotten better at it over the years. And I have very little anxiety now or shyness about doing it. And so that's me. So I can only speak from my experience about how to get over that tibbiness issue, but also knowing your topic really well is super helpful, kind of gives you confidence in doing that. So that's one of the things I would say about that particular question. So running a meeting, really success in running a meeting starts long before the meeting. And making sure that you have relationships with those that you're going to be running the meeting with, for, in partnership with. And you want to build those relationships and you want to build that trust. Because as a chair, you're going to be a lot of things. You're going to be a mediator. You're going to have to make decisions. You're going to have to administrate. You're going to have to be a diplomat. And it really helps to be able to do that if you have relationships with the people that you're having the meeting with, and that you know them, and that they trust you to some degree, you trust them to some degree. Now, I mean, you might believe something totally different than other people in that meeting or on the board of whatever particular organization you're with, whether it's a private organization. I've been an executive officer for a private trade group for, I think it's 17 years now. And we try to let our presidents run the meetings as much as possible, but staff gets tapped to do a fair amount as well. And so making sure that you have those relationships, that you know the topics that are coming up, super helpful. Always have an agenda. If you do not have an agenda going into a meeting, I'm not saying like a political agenda, I'm like talking about a written agenda. And when I say the meeting, chairing a meeting successfully starts before, usually it means the agenda and some sort of notice. You put out a notice for the meeting, and so an agenda, it looks a lot. They all look relatively similar, I would say. Kind of start out with typically opening comments from a presiding officer, a chair, somebody like that. Many meetings have invocations. We still have invocations in the Senate. As a matter of fact, I gave one last Thursday. So, and then many meetings and groups still do Pledge of Allegiance. And so that's typically on the agenda. And then many times there's basically the first thing you've got to do is establish a quorum. And there's been a lot said about quorums, especially in the legislature over the last few years. So you need to have a quorum to actually have an official meeting. So whatever your quorum rules are, most meetings are either a simple majority of those present, or 3/5 or 2/3 typically are the amount that's needed to establish a quorum. In the legislature, it's 2/3. So 40 reps and 20 senators are required to legally do business. And so on a board of 6 people, you may need to have 5 of those present in order to actually have a legal meeting. So you want to establish your quorum. Typically, then there's adoption of minutes, and those are almost always done by motion. So somebody makes a motion, there's a second to that motion to establish a legal motion, and then the chairperson would ask for discussion. And sometimes people kind of just skip over that and move right to the vote. You want to give time for people to discuss the issues, because they sometimes get a little cranky if you don't give them a chance to discuss things. And so with each motion, you're always going to want to make sure that you're hitting that discussion point and allowing people time to do that. I typically, if it's a larger meeting or multiple people, I like to keep a list of who wants to speak and who wants to discuss. And that way you can kind of take people as they ask for the opportunity to speak. Hopefully, time management is obviously one of the things that you have to be concerned about, because these meetings can go on for a long time. There's also in public meetings, many times, especially like city councils and things like that, they'll have a time for public input and like speeches from the public that'll last 1 to 3 minutes. And that can take a long time as well. So that's sometimes part of it. But if you go that route, you got to be willing to see it through. And if 100 people show up, it's pretty hard to say no to number 51 or number 81 or number 99, right? So I wouldn't necessarily advise that, because if you get a hot topic, you're going to be there most of the night to hear people. But in the legislature, obviously, that's what we're about, is public testimony, or at least that's what people say it's about. And we obviously want to have in-person testimony if possible. Other things on the agenda, lots of times reports. So you'll lots of times have a treasurer's report. You want to know how much money is in the organization. Many times you want to adopt that treasurer's report and note that that's happened. I mean, one of the things about a meeting is you want to take good minutes and you want to deal with mainly motions. If you're going to write things down, you're going to put them in the minutes. You really only want to do motions. You don't want to say, Bob said to Sally that, green is a better color than blue. And so, but if there's a motion that green is a better color than blue, you want to memorialize that in the minutes. But you don't want to just write down all the discussion necessarily that happened. You just want to write down the result of what happened. Now, lots of times public meetings are taped and this is being recorded. So all that's going to be there anyway, but there's always an official set of minutes, especially in private organizations and groups like mine. There's always a set of minutes, and you want to make sure that those are being well kept so you can go back later and look to see what happened and, did the budget really get adopted? Those types of things, pretty important. Lots of times you'll have committee reports as well. So if your organization has different committees, you'll hear from the committee, usually the chair of that committee or the sub chair, what have you. You'll always, on agenda, you'll want to put new business because that covers a fair amount of things. And I always put other business because that's an all-encompassing one. So if a board member has something that they want to talk about, but they don't tell you ahead of time, you can always cover it under other business. It may not be new business because it might be a topic you've talked about 20 times. So I always have a category on the agenda as other business. And then adjourn, and you'll want to make sure you memorialize when you adjourn. So when somebody looks back on the minutes, they know that it was a 1 hour meeting or a 3 hour meeting or what have you, as opposed to just having it open-ended. Nobody really knows how long the meeting went or when it ended. And also good to memorialize the start time as well. I mean, typically in your agenda that you send out, it'll have a start time and it'll have a location. Hopefully, most of these meetings now, it's meeting by Zoom, starting, at whatever time. And then people will make different motions throughout the meeting. And as the board chair, if you're running the meeting, you're going to have to determine, are those motions in order? And so somebody might make a motion to, let's say, Bob made a motion to say green is a better color than blue. There's a second. But Joe doesn't like the motion, wants to get rid of it somehow. So he moves to table because he's not sure he's going to win the vote. So he wants to stall. So you can move to table. I believe a motion to table is not debatable. And so that's one of the motions that people can make. If people are going on and on and on in talking, someone may call for the question. It's another motion. And want to have the vote, even though discussion is going on. And strategically, some people use that to cut off debate. And sometimes they want to cut off debate they don't want to hear. Or maybe it's damaging to their case. And so they don't want to talk about it. And they think maybe they have the votes to shut it down because people on both sides are getting antsy and they want to vote on it. And so, there's different, options there as well. You can make a point of order. If somebody's getting off topic or, you want to make a point, you can have a motion for a point of order. It's always usually the chair will recognize a point of order. What's your point of order? Say what it is, and then you either move on or you get bogged down. But there's lots of ways to tie things up. There's amendments to motions. If if Bob made the motion to say green is better than blue, somebody could move to amend and say that green and yellow are better than blue. And then you would have to vote on the amendment to the motion. And so you can get, you can have a lot of different aspects of a particular vote, and it can go on for any length of time. So if you've ever been involved with a political party, you know that usually it takes a while to credential people at the meeting. And typically, you know who's supposed to be there, but like with political parties, delegates change, or they have alternate delegates that come, and not everybody knows who they are. And you want to make sure that people who are voting are the right people who are voting. And so sometimes credentialing takes a really long time and can slow down a meeting significantly. And if there's something really contentious, I mean, I've seen credentialing literally take half to 2/3 of a day to get done. So, I mean, it can go on for a long time. And, people typically don't come to spend 4 to 6 hours trying to figure out who's actually legal to be there to vote in the meeting. But those are just some of the things that happen. And I've been involved 30 plus years in various organizations, from nonprofit to political to elected. And I don't know that I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot of it for sure. And so really important when you're making your points to be really direct, but obviously polite. You're always going to do better if you're polite, because long term, you want to continue to maintain those relationships. If you're going to be on a board, you don't want to burn bridges, because in organizations, especially elected organizations, you'd be surprised that sometimes your adversary on one vote is the person you need literally on the next vote, or the next afternoon, or the next day. And so even though you think they may have the worst argument known to the history of the world, you may not want to comment that it's the worst argument you've ever heard in the history of the world, because they may be offended for life, and you may need them in a future meeting or vote. And so I always tell people, do not burn bridges unnecessarily. And I've seen many people nuke the bridge and be in a world of trouble. And if they had not done it, they would have been more successful. And so, staying calm, especially if you're running the meeting, really important. As lots of times people will try to get you riled up as the chair, and maybe even fluster you. If they are an adversary and they don't want a bill, they may try to, get you to sort of come unhinged as the chair of the meeting. And so you have to remain calm. And I think it's important to try not to have your own personal agenda if you're the chair or the leader of the meeting. And if if there's an agenda there, you need to make sure that there's somebody else that's driving that agenda, because you want to remain, you don't have to be neutral, but you want to remain as fair as possible. And if you're the one that's seen as the chair in the meeting driving the agenda, I think people are going to be turned off by that, generally speaking. And it's best to have somebody else making motions, driving things, seconding motions, and you're just fielding those and making sure that they're appropriate and so on. But making sure that you're communicating with whoever's there and doing that directly, doing that politely, and making your point, and then moving on. Not giving the entire history of the history from the beginning of the world until present, to tell us that you need potholes filled from across the street. And, you know, you don't want to go back to the Pilgrims coming in 1620 and, you know, that your relatives are descendants of them and they moved across the country and they ultimately ended up in Oregon. And 3 hours later, you're talking about the street where you know of that has potholes on it. So you want to just establish I'm a resident of X street. There's potholes in front of my house. They are damaging the cars. They're dangerous for kids riding bikes, etc. This needs to be addressed. You know, get in, get out, make a point, make a motion. And really important to line up support ahead of time if you want to be successful. You want to make sure that you have the votes. And it's the worst thing in the world to go into a meeting thinking you're going to win and then find out that you're not, and can set your cause back quite a bit. And there's nothing that the chair of the meeting can do about that once the vote takes place. The vote is the vote. And you may find yourself starting all over again or going back to square one on whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. But it's always good as the chair not to react, you know, and show so much favoritism to one side or the other. Again, especially after the vote, the losing party may take offense. And again, it's about building relationships, not burning the bridges down. You always want to seek input from others. So as the chair of a committee, lots of times you'll have a vice chair, or you'll have a first vice president who's going to become the chair the next year or 2 years from now, however long your chairmanship may last. And really important to just make sure that you're including other people in the leadership group, whatever group you're in. If you're the chair of the meeting or you're the chair of the organization and you're going to run the meeting, including others' input. People join a board for a reason. You know, I don't know why Michelle wants to run for the Illinois Valley Fire District, but she obviously has a reason that she wants to do it. And maybe it's so they're more fiscally accountable. Who knows? You know, maybe it's she believes they need additional fire trucks. Maybe it's that she wants to expand the district, or she wants to contract the district, or what have you. But people always have a reason that they're on the board. And so building those relationships, figuring out what people want, including them in the discussion, pulling them in, always more successful than not. Also gives you a window into what you can do to influence them to support whatever direction it is that you're looking to move the board. Because if you can put their agenda item in with yours, you're always going to be more successful in kind of building the team and building the organization than you know, kind of deciding things ahead of time, not telling people what you're going to do, and then just try to kind of work it behind the scenes. In Oregon, we have open meetings laws, so you know, almost all meetings need to take place in public. There's a few exceptions to that. One of those exceptions is caucuses in the legislature. Usually the party not in power doesn't like the secrecy of caucuses. Democrats, when Republicans were in power, were like, this is terrible, we can't believe this. Republicans shouldn't be meeting in secret. And then they took control and all of a sudden they didn't care anymore. And they were happy to meet in secret. And so, you know, consistency. I'll make sure that you're being consistent. And, you know, if you're going to be political about that, you might want to think it through, because many times the tables get turned and somebody else is in charge, and however you treated people as how you can expect to be treated. Now, an interesting example of that, in 2001, during redistricting, and I happened to be a House member at the time, Constitution says you have to accomplish that by July 1st. If you don't do it, maps go to the Secretary of State. We had a Republican House, we had a Republican Senate, we had a Democrat governor. We ended up with a plan that we passed through the House, through the Senate, and Governor John Kitzhaber vetoed it. So we decided, well, albeit unprecedented, we're going to try to go through an HJR and move a redistricting plan. And an HJR doesn't have to have the signature of the governor. Well, we were a week from July 1st, and the Democrats staged a walkout to deny a quorum, to deny us a vote on something that they said was unconstitutional. And we said, well, if it's unconstitutional, then the courts will tell us it's unconstitutional and you will win. And they said, we're not going to take the chance. We'll see you in a week. And so the modern day walkout was demonstrated and accomplished by House Democrats. So when Democrats complain now that Republicans have used that parliamentary tool, some of us who were there and who are in the majority and have our plan set aside don't have a lot of sympathy for it. And, that's coming from somebody who isn't a big supporter of walking away from a fight. So, that just gives you an idea of, if you're going to engage in a certain behavior and set a precedent, don't be surprised if that precedent is used against you in the future when things change, because there's one constant in this world, and it is things change, and especially in elected office. And as you know, 6 months is a long time in politics, and you never know what's going to happen, what crisis there's going to be. Nobody expected COVID a year and a half ago. I'm sure there was a few people who were thinking about it and so on, but nobody knew, in the general population or elected officials really, that what kind of impact this was going to have on our, on our elected office holders, on our constituents, and how everybody would react. And so, again, just be careful what kind of precedents you set. And I would also say that when you're communicating, it's really important to be as specific as possible. Words mean things, and the emergency powers ballot measure that was passed, I think it was about 10 years ago, never anticipated this type of emergency, yet the governor, through the courts, has almost unlimited power because of that ballot measure. So again, important to be specific, and words mean things. And so it's good not to rush, because when you have when you have a meeting, you have an agenda, it's always important to vet things with as many people as possible, get as much input. It's part of the reason that we have a bicameral legislature. We have a House and a Senate, and it has to work its way through a House committee, and most of the time then it has to work its way through a Senate committee. There's obviously exceptions to that when a bill goes to Ways and Means, but there's almost always another committee where it has to go to. And so it isn't just a one and done, but through executive order, it is one and done. And so again, we have to be careful about how we're looking at things and how we're communicating, and important really to be specific. I would encourage you, if you're part of a group, you're going to want to get a pretty cheap copy. I mean, you can get a fancy copy, but here's a copy of Robert's Rules of Order. I'm not sure which edition this is, but it's a newly revised edition. But it's always good to have one of those. Keep it in your, bring it with you to the meeting. look through it, study it. One of the best parliamentarian people we had in the House was a guy named Jim Hill, great guy from Hillsborough. But he was our guy for Robert's Rules of Order. And so when we got stuck and wanted to try to figure out, how he, in that particular case, it was how we could move things because we were in the majority. So it's like, how can we shut these guys down in a legitimate way and move on with our agenda? Because the legislature, there's also minority reports, which I didn't talk about in most organizations. I don't know that those exist, but in the legislature there is. And so you can not endlessly stall things in the legislature, but you can definitely stall things. And so all those tools are available to you. So when you're running a meeting, you have to be aware of what those tools are. And so it's good to study Robert's Rules of Order and make sure that you have a decent understanding of it. You don't have to be an expert. And, it takes years and years and years before you're, going to see a lot of these motions because most boards operate informally, probably quite frankly, too informally. And it's really important to create that structure and formality. So you do the same thing every time. And so it's not, sometimes you have a motion without a second. Sometimes you have a motion and a second. Sometimes you vote, sometimes you don't. I mean, believe me, I've seen this and it's not a good way to do it because you want to make sure that everybody is kind of working from the same page and comes to expect the same thing. And so you want to do it in a proper way. And so important to keep Robert's Rules of Order there and at least have some knowledge of that when you're serving on a board, especially if you're going to be chairing the meeting. Lots of times they give you a gavel, so you gavel in, you gavel out, and you want to make sure, at the end of the meeting, I always encourage people to take a motion to end the meeting because that way somebody can't say, oh, the chair just took the prerogative and, ended the meeting and I had more to say or I wanted to do something. And so you have a motion and a second to adjourn. And usually most people are super excited to vote for that motion. So no reason not to do it, basically, because it takes less than 30 seconds, really, if you get to that point on the agenda. But I can just tell you that it gets pretty informal in some of these, both private organizations as well as some elected government organizations as well. So with that, I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions out there from those of you who have joined us. And I think we had Jody join us not too long after we started. So any questions?
Any questions of Senator Knopp? I have posted a couple of things on the chat window that you might want to check out. There is an organization called the National Association of Parliamentarians. They specialize in training people how to use parliamentary procedure in the organizations that they are in. They have a list of 300 questions that I've provided a link to. The answers to the 300 questions are all found in the Robert's Rules of Order book that Senator Knopp showed. And the entrance exam to become a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians consists of 100 questions out of the pool of 300 questions that they provide. So if you study the 300 questions, you cannot fail the entrance exam. And then you can say you are a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians. That is a qualification. If you study those and you're able to answer those questions, you will know something about parliamentary procedure. Of course, there's no substitute for actually participating in meetings, but this will give you some of the structure that you need to understand what's going on meetings, and then you can participate in them. Senator Knopp, because he's been on so many committees and served in the House of Representatives, has been in many of these and has probably been the user of and the victim of Robert's Rules of Order at lots of different times. So with that, I will ask if anyone here has any questions or comments or ideas or requests that they'd like to pass along to Senator Knopp.
I have a question. I actually have a couple questions for you. I just recently started volunteering and becoming involved down in Douglas County. And I have a question about the quorum rules with the technology now that we have with Zoom. At one of our last meetings, we had a person that became really unruly. It was quite upsetting to watch them, but what they were upset about was that the prior meeting was on with Zoom as well, because some of the members couldn't make it, the board members. And so she took over. I mean, it was really an unbelievable behavior that I saw. And I'm just, like I said, I'm just becoming involved. But I'm wondering, with the quorum rules, what happened was the Zoom meeting wasn't successful as far as being able to link everybody in. I think that many of the members are not familiar with Zoom, and it's a new concept for them. And so they didn't know how to interact. They don't know how to communicate. And then there was a dropped link. And so we lost the ability, the Zoom stopped pretty much. So anyway, what her complaint was that everything that happened from the prior meeting should be null and void because she did not get to vote. And so I'm wondering about that. And then also my next question is, how could I, or another person that is not the chair, because I believe the chair might have been in shock, truthfully, because I was in shock by the behavior of this lady. So those are my two things.
Well, Loretta, this is precisely the reason why I supported in-person meetings of the legislature, in-person meetings of organizations, is because a lot of people who are board members don't know how to operate Zoom, have never done that before. Internet connections are not created equal. I was hoping I would have a good internet connection today. I'm in my office in Bend, and I go Monday through Friday. I keep a regular schedule. I go to the Capitol, and part of the reason I do that is because the internet is so much better at the Capitol than it is here, especially when all the kids in the neighborhood get online to do their school. It slows the internet thing down, and I can't be in a position where things are freezing up and you can't hear what people are saying, and you get knocked offline and you got to get back online. And so what I would say to you is that if your organization had a Zoom meeting and they did not have a quorum, whatever the quorum is for your group, and establish that at the meeting, I would say that whoever is challenging that probably has a point if votes took place and there wasn't an actual quorum present. And I think the courts have generally okayed these Zoom meetings, but I do not like the idea of the legislature voting to pass bills out of committees without the committee members being present. And I think it's a bad precedent to set. The presiding officers have recognized that they do not believe that ability exists for floor votes on the House and Senate floor. So they are requiring people to show up in person for floor votes to be recorded. But for committee votes, they are seeing those differently. And so I would just say that you make sure that you have, before there's a vote that takes place, that there's an established quorum, because people drop in and out of meetings. Normally when you're in a room, you can see that Jill or Joe walked out before the vote took place. And so you either had a quorum or you didn't. and you record those who are there. And so, the presiding officer, the chair, will either excuse people or say that they were absent from the meeting and record that in the minutes. Well, when you're on Zoom, I know it's hard to know, is somebody really there? If their camera is off, are they really there? So it's certainly a difficult one, but I would just say that that person likely has a point. And so if it came to a lawsuit and the court said, well, you didn't have a quorum that existed when the votes took place, it very well could mean that those items on the agenda will not be sustained. And I don't know if somebody would be willing to take it to court, but if I was part of that organization, I wouldn't have allowed the meeting to continue without a quorum. And if you were having issues, probably what I would do is I would, at the next meeting where there is a quorum, I would have those items be brought up again and just to confirm them.
There actually is a procedure to deal with that in Robert's Rules of Order. First of all, with regard to quorum, I don't know if this is true in the Senate or in the House, but a lot of times you're not sure if there's quorum or not, and people just get around to the business of doing business. And if you're doing business and you don't have a quorum, but nobody knows it, and you started with a quorum, then the business is valid until it's established that you don't have a quorum. Someone has to do a quorum call if they suspect there's not a quorum. And then business that has taken place after it's been established that there's not a quorum is invalid. Now they can continue to pass things, but none of them are valid. They all are subject to ratification at the next meeting. And the body is not obliged to ratify actions taken by the same body in the absence of a quorum. And that's kind of what Senator Knopp is talking about. If you take actions as a quorum or you take actions without a quorum, you need to have it ratified at the next meeting. But there is a loophole. There is, if you don't know, if nobody's pointed out there's not a quorum, then you started out with a quorum and you're doing business, it's all valid until someone says, hey, wait a minute, do we have a quorum here? Let's do a quorum call. And it is, of course, the responsibility of the presiding officer, if he or she suspects there's not a quorum, he or she is required to make note of that and in essence, do a quorum call themselves. But a lot of times, if you're in a group with hundreds of people, it's not always clear if you have quorum or not. So if the chair doesn't suspect there's a lack of quorum and you're still conducting business, you can until somebody says, wait a minute, do we have a quorum? Let's have a quorum call. So it's not always cut and dry. A lot depends on what the bylaws of your organization are. Robert's Rules of Order says that if you are an assembly of members, that quorum consists of 50% plus one of the members in an assembly. But if you're not an assembly of members, if you are a delegation-based thing, like a national convention where you have delegates, it's 50% of the delegates plus one, unless there is a clause in your bylaws which establishes what quorum is. Like in the Libertarian Party of Oregon, we have a quorum clause in our bylaws that says it's 25% of the dues paying members or a certain percentage of registered voters, whichever is less. And that overrides, if it's in your bylaws, it overrides what's in Robert's Rules of Order. So generally in public boards, like when I was on the Tualatin Valley Water District Board of Commissioner, quorum consisted of 3. So we had to be very, very careful if we were ever on an airplane going to a water convention, as we did once a year, or if somehow we were in a meeting somewhere in Portland and there were 3 of us in a room together, we had to try to not be in a room together because that constituted a quorum. And so quorum can be very tricky. And as I understand it in the legislature, the Democrats are trying to make it even trickier after what happened last year. But anyhow, I'm sorry, Senator Knopp, but I thought that might be helpful.
No, that's great. And as it relates to creating a quorum of like 3 people from a committee or whatever, it's usually if you're talking about business or doing business. Richard and two of his colleagues on a plane deciding whether they're going to get bourbon or vodka probably isn't going to violate the rules. But if they were talking about the fire district and what they thought about getting a new fire truck, over the seats with three of them present, that's definitely a violation of, you've created a quorum, you're now talking business. You could be in a bunch of trouble for that. And so was the woman who was complaining, was she at the meeting where the problem was happening, or did she come to the next meeting and say she didn't like the problem?
That's what I was going to say, is that she was on the Zoom part that wasn't able to communicate. And so that was my question too. So they did go ahead and said that they voted on everything again. And to basically, I didn't understand it. And so thank you for explaining it, both of you, just to make it right. And so there were several items that they re-voted with everybody present. But that was, and I do, thank you, I need to read all these things so I can actually appreciate what it is that they're doing. Because I think, well, actually the chairwoman she runs a tight ship. She does a really good job, but this lady was so out of control. And I wanted to actually walk out because I just couldn't believe that someone could act like that. And then she just wouldn't stop. It's every communication that she was doing, and she was right up in the front. I think she's probably been part of the organization for a long time. I don't know, but that was my next question is, what can be done to stop that kind of behavior? Because I don't even know if anybody could have gotten a word in edgewise why she was doing what she was doing.
So Loretta, she was on Zoom?
No, in the first meeting she was on Zoom. The second meeting that I attended, she was able to participate physically. That's when she was acting the way that she was acting. And they did, like I said, they did re-vote on all of those items to make to make sure that it was right. They listened to her, but like I said, two things, she kept going and going, and then she was just, it was unbelievable, the scene that she made.
Yeah, well, Robert's Rules has provisions to rule somebody out of order, and you can do that, but of course, if they don't be quiet or they don't leave the room, it's going to be incumbent upon whoever the chair is to make arrangements for that. I mean, it's very difficult, especially when you have a volunteer board and a committee. I mean, we have like sergeants at arms in the legislature, and we also have a lot of police protection these days. And so you get too far out of line, you're going to be meeting with one of them. But in a volunteer organization like that, it's really difficult and that's where it's going to take a lot of patience from the chair to work with everybody. So trying to get that person settled down, while at the same time making sure you still have your board members who are voting, don't want to walk out and want to continue the business at hand. And so that's one of the toughest ones to deal with. And sorry you had to go through that.
It's tough. Now, Loretta, one other thing I'd like to recommend is that if you find that you're in a position where you might have trouble, there are a couple of things you can do. One is to hold the meeting in a private venue. If you control the venue, you have a lot more ability to control who has access to it. If you have rented a room, or you are in a private home, or you are in a venue that you have control over, you can demand that unruly people leave. You can order them. I mean, there's a technical procedure in Robert's Rules of Order where you put them under parliamentary arrest. But nobody goes there. But you just control the environment and say, look, this is private property, and you need to leave. And if they don't, you could call the police. There have been situations I've seen back in 1994. We had to hire a private security firm that had the authority to deal with people, forcibly if they became violent or if they became difficult, and we put them under the direction of a designated sergeant at arms. And then the chair can direct the sergeant at arms to remove people who are being difficult. These kind of things are very, very rare, and they're never good. And they're usually the sign of a dysfunctional organization if you have this on a regular basis. But
Okay.
these are things you can do. People are not helpless when there is a situation where you have somebody who is just completely unruly and destroying the organization's ability to do business.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much. I
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks
your
for
help.
asking.
Hello, Tim.
Hey, Lucy.
Yeah, hi there. What was that ballot measure that you referred to about 10 years ago that gave almost unlimited power to the governor?
Boy, I don't remember what ballot measure it was, but I know Brian Boquist is involved in getting into the ballot. So it was a legislative referral.
Okay.
And really what was in the thinking of the time was kind of the big one, the earthquake, and continuity of power and all those things and how that would work. And, I know that they just never talked about it, but we could, if you want to know the specific one, we could research it and find it for you. I mean, it passed
Okay.
pretty overwhelmingly.
All right. And just wanted to throw this out about Robert's Rules of Order. It's something that as a Toastmaster, we refer to once in a while, but they're available at just about any thrift shop. You can find a copy.
Yep. Yeah, you can find one for cheap. So don't spend a lot of money on these.
Thank you.
I think a new copy was $15.
Yeah.
I think it's on the 10th revision right now. Michelle, I saw you unmuted for a while. Do you have a question?
I have, and I just wanted to ask Senator Knopp. I understand that our Oregon legislature uses Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure rather than Robert's Rules of Order. And can you explain, is there an appreciable difference between the two that makes Mason's the preferred rules for the Oregon House and Senate?
Quite frankly, Michelle, I've never thought too much about it. And I imagine there are some differences, but truthfully, I couldn't tell you the differences between the two. I mean, we get our copies of Mason's and we probably look through it, when we first get elected. And I've got 3 versions of it, I think, because they've updated every once in a while, right? But it's generally the same. I mean, I know that there's a lot of similarities, but I honestly couldn't tell you what differences there are. I don't know. Richard, do you know?
I don't. In fact, I'm ashamed to say that until Michelle brought this up, I'd never heard of the Mason's book before.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'd be curious to learn about it myself. There are a couple of different, there are several different ways of conducting business that are pretty well established. Roberts is the most commonly used, but there are others.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say Mason's is geared more toward elective public bodies. So some things that would be appropriate for a Robert's rules in a private organization probably wouldn't fit with Mason's. And so, but I think it's just what the legislature decides to adopt to use.
One of the things I encourage groups to do is to have a clear set of bylaws, have a mechanism within those bylaws to resolve disputes, but also to use a parliamentary authority like Robert's Rules of Order consistently. When everyone's getting along and they agree, you don't really need it. People can be informal. When you need it is when people disagree, and because it's a way to ensure that people are fairly heard. But if you're not in the habit of using it during the good times, people will see it as an oppressive tool during the bad times, even though it may not be. So my recommendation is, if you are on a public board, or you are in a club or an activist organization, have a set of bylaws so that you know what the lines of authority are, what people are entitled to do in their roles and what they're not entitled to do, what they need to check up on or get approval for. Make sure you've got something like that, and make sure you have some kind of parliamentary authority to refer to, so that you don't have somebody up there at the chair declaring things are out of order or not out of order and having no basis for that, having an arbitrary ruling. I've seen organizations completely blow up over this kind of stuff. So it's good to have that and then learn it. People who have the ability to learn parliamentary procedure, whether it be Roberts or Masons or anything else, people who have the ability to learn it and choose not to are basically choosing to cripple themselves when it comes to not only participating in meetings, not to mention leading meetings, or simply understanding meetings, what's likely to have happen. So that's why I encourage people to take advice of the sort that Senator Knopp has provided today and seriously consider going to the National Association of Parliamentarians website, studying the list of 300 questions that I've posted, take the exam, join the NAP. And then when you are in an organization and you want to be chair, you can say, I'm a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians. I can run a meeting. And even if you don't want to be chair, maybe you just want to be the parliamentarian, or maybe you want to know how the meeting works. And if you're a member, you can say point of order, and you know what the heck you're talking about. Somebody who's in a meeting that knows Robert's Rules of Order when almost nobody else does has the ability to really control the flow of a meeting. Now, they're not always popular if they do that, but it is on people to understand the rules under which people are conducting business. And so this is a good tool. And if you are elected to anything, it's imperative that you understand this. It sounds like Masons is really similar to Robert's Rules of Order. I've seen a couple of other methods. The Greens use a different method, but they have a lot in common. And so if you learn Robert's Rules of Order, you can operate in business, you can operate in government, you can operate in private clubs, you can do a lot of different things. And if you're in a different parliamentary structure, you can make adaptations, but you'll have the basics down. Does anybody else have any questions for Senator Knopp? And thank you, Michelle, for educating me on the alternate parliamentary authority. I'll have to study.
Yeah, we'll look into the Masons Roberts difference a little bit and see. I mean, I feel like Roberts is slightly less voluminous than Masons is, but beyond that, I don't know like key differences between the two. So, but we'll investigate that a little bit and get back to you if we get a good answer to it.
Circle back.
Thank you.
Yeah. So very good. Are there any other questions? It's about 8 minutes after 2. And if nobody has any more questions, we will call it a day. And we will.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll have another training next Saturday. I think FreedomWorks is going to be the FreedomWorks National Office is going to be our guest trainer next week. So stay tuned, same bat time, same bat channel. And this is our 13th training. These are going well, and the recordings bit by bit are being placed on the training tab of the westernlibertynetwork.org website. So until the next time, thank you very much. God bless, and have a great remainder of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.